You know, I think The Legend of Zelda Four Swords Adventures is the most forgotten about Zelda game.
OMG, I totally remember this game.
No you don't. You're lying. Four Swords Adventures sold less than 1 million copies, making it the worst-selling mainline Zelda game of all time. Link's crossbow training on the Wii sold 5 times as many copies. Nintendo sold more of their failed Virtual Boy console than they did copies of Four Swords Adventures. I even have more subscribers than sold copies of Four Swords Adventures. One day in the future, maybe, if you subscribe right now. And believe it or not, Four Swords Adventures is technically a sequel. He said Four Swords Adventures 5 times in the last 30 seconds. His rating's gone to shit. Cancel him. Four Swords originally was a little multiplayer add-on experience bundled in with the Game Boy Advance port of A Link to the Past. The idea was, when Link pulled out this legendary Four Sword, he could split himself into 4, thus multiplying his heroliness. You know, that could be really helpful around the studio here. Maybe I could finally fire that intern. I'm the real ravioli. I'm the real ravioli. I'm the real ravioli. I'm the real ravioli.
HD. This seat's steak.
So, I could stay, right? For the first time ever, you could play The Legend of Zelda with your friends, and all you needed to play was 4 Nintendo Game Boy Advance or Game Boy Advance SP consoles, 4 copies of The Legend of Zelda A Link to the Past and Four Swords, and a 4-player Game Boy Advance link cable. Nice and simple. This game is literally made for children, and it's from 2002 when being a gamer was more of a niche and not really a norm. Imagine trying to explain all of that to some suburban mom who's just trying to pick up some Christmas presents. Yeah, so you just need 4 Game Boy Advances, 4 copies of the game, and this 4-way link cable so your kids can all play together.
You shut up! You shut up! I'm so fucking scared right now, you shut up!
Luckily, Nintendo released an anniversary edition of Four Swords on the DSi shop in 2012 and the 3DS shop in 2014. This allowed the game to be played via the glory of local wireless and even introduced a single-player mode. It wasn't until the 2012 release that I actually got to try Four Swords, and, well, it's neat enough. I don't think there's anything too special about it other than it being a multiplayer Zelda game. It's kind of just a slower-paced dungeon crawling experience, and I don't think it's really particularly amazing. It's not bad, it's just not incredible. They did, however, implement some neat ideas, and it clearly inspired the Minish Cap, which came out a couple years later. They even had an item called the Nat Hat, which had the exact same function as the Minish Cap. It's just kind of cool seeing where the Minish mechanic came from. But unfortunately, if you want to play this game with friends nowadays, you can kindly go yourself. Both the DSi and 3DS releases were limited time downloads, so unless you have a Nintendo DS family of systems console with the game still installed or an actually functioning time machine, it's pretty much impossible to play, let alone play multiplayer. I even tried to download the game by perfectly normal and completely legal means on my PC, and I just couldn't find a working file. Luckily, I still have Four Swords installed on my 3DS, so I could at least try it out before writing this video. Many consider it to be its own Zelda title, but I kinda disagree. It very much felt just like a little spin-off. It only takes a couple hours to beat, and with it being nearly impossible to play, I figured I'd just lump it in with the actual title I want to discuss in this video. Four Swords
Adventures.
Four Swords Adventures is a fully realized Four Swords adventure. It released 2 years after the original Four Swords and launched in between the Wind Waker in 2003 and the Minish Cap in late 2004. Fun fact, between 2002 and 2004, they released 4 entire Zelda games. We don't even get a new Zelda game every 6 bloody years nowadays. But anyways, Four Swords Adventures is a full console release multiplayer Zelda game. Each player could take control of a single Link, and it's almost easier to play with your friends than the OG Four Swords. This time, you only need 1 copy of the game. And a GameCube, and a Game Boy Advance, 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 and a Game Boy Advance to GameCube controller port adapter, and a secondary Game Boy Advance to GameCube controller port adapter, and a tertiary Game Boy Advance to GameCube controller port adapter, and a quaternary Game Boy Advance to GameCube controller port adapter. Alright, so your total will be $634.96.
You can't keep getting away with it! He can't keep getting away with it!
This was a super neat idea though. The Game Boy Advance consoles acted as second screens for the main adventure. As soon as you went inside a room on the main screen of the game, your Link would move onto the Game Boy screen. This allowed each player to have free reign over where they wanted to go and what they wanted to do without interrupting the other players. It also led to a lot of neat multi-layered puzzles with gates to the mirror world and cool ideas like this massive doomsday bomb only escapable by hiding inside of your Game Boy Advance. Despite how cool these ideas were though, it was very confusing getting it all set up, and I feel like this is a big factor as to why it didn't sell super well. That, and the fact that Zelda hadn't really had a casual entry into the series at this point. Playing with friends was a pain in the ass, and it released so close to the Wind Waker, I just feel like most people didn't bother with it. There is a single player mode, which is what I played for this video, and surprisingly, it's great. I was actually really impressed at how well they were able to design a multiplayer game that also played so well single player. You could move the links into different formations to solve various puzzles, and you could also control individual links to carry out various tasks. It works extremely well, and despite some puzzles taking a tiny bit longer with only one player, it's a perfectly fine way to play the game. I was a little worried with how it would work with the way items are used. You can only carry one at a time, and at certain points you can switch between them. I didn't want to end up swapping out and missing out on some sort of secret, but I found out that you never really had to worry about leaving an item behind and getting stuck, as they did a really good job of having the items you need near enough to be able to progress. There was only a couple moments where I had to backtrack a room or two to swap out for an item to get into a secret area or grab an extra treasure chest, but at no point did I ever actually get stuck because I didn't have the item I needed. All of these factors made the puzzling in Four Swords Adventures really unique. I honestly wouldn't mind seeing more Zelda gameplay like this.
Maybe you should play Triforce Heroes.
No. I really had a lot of fun with Four Swords Adventures. It's a much more casual Zelda experience, and the first few levels run so smoothly. Everything is broken up into single stages instead of a big overworld like traditional Zelda games, and it works really great for this style of game. The stages are a little more linear, chock full of neat puzzles, and only last about 20 to 30 minutes for the most part. Some of the levels that try and break the linearity end up taking far too long and make you backtrack a lot. It's very much a mixed bag. Some of the levels are extremely well designed, like this tower where you have a really cool mix of vertical and horizontal rooms. And some stages are like this where every wrong entrance sends you all the way back to the start of the level. The dungeon levels are all pretty much fantastic, but some of the levels that try to be more non-linear kinda miss the mark. Each level also requires you to pick up at least 2,000 of these force gems, which adds a little bit of incentive to explore, and it's just kind of fun scooping up large amounts of money. I think the main thing I hate about Four Swords Adventures is Tingle. This green bastard has the audacity to try and float in and take my Triforce gems.
You mess with my gems, Tingle, I mess with yours.
Wow!
As far as the plot goes, it's as bare bones as you can get. Zelda's in trouble, Link sets out to save her from a pseudo-bad guy who was actually being controlled by Ganon this whole time. My question is, why is Link always a kid? This is child abuse, Nintendo.
What the hell?
Aesthetically, this game looks pretty neat. It utilized classic top-down Zelda visuals, but mixed in higher quality effects for fire and explosions and the like. It looks great aside from the bosses that looked like they were literally ripped from the Wind Waker and de-rezzed. I mentioned this briefly in my Phantom Hourglass video, but I really miss the experimental days of Nintendo. I'd love if they kept making smaller creative adventures like these while we wait for the bigger releases. I don't see why every Zelda game nowadays has to be 3D and massive. Why not make a top-down multiplayer Zelda for Switch? Maybe a brand new adventure in the style of Link's Awakening. Try some out-of-the-box stuff and give us something to bide the time between Breath of the Wilds. Anyways, Four Swords is a unique Zelda adventure, and despite the multiplayer being very inaccessible, the single player can still hold its own and boast some truly one-of-a-kind puzzles and dungeons. So where does Four Swords land on my list? Well, a big part of my ranking system is replayability. Would I play this again? Absolutely. I could easily see myself a few years from now picking it up and playing through, or even tracking down some components I need to play with a friend or two. I really like this game, and I like it just as much as I remember liking it as a kid. I definitely don't think it's top 10 material, but I think for now I'm going to drop it in the number 11 slot. Alright guys, that's it. I should really go check on my Four Sword clones. I had the intern let them outside to play. Wait a second. Where did you get those? Don't pick those up. Intern, help! Intern!